Welcome back YouTube. In today's educational series we are going to be talking about meal plans versus flexible dieting and which one is superior and what are they both, and also which one leads to better results. So firstly, let's establish what each one of these is. A meal plan, pretty straightforward, so I'm sure 95% of you know what a meal plan is. So a meal plan in simple terms is a pre-planned structure of meals that you would consume on a daily basis. Okay, so there's no, and we're going to get into this in a bit, but there's no kind of right or wrong, there's no superior or inferior. It's whatever works best for the individual, and we're going to delve into it in a bit in regards to what I prefer and what I will set for a lot of my clients, but also which one typically leads to the better results. So a meal plan is similar meals or identical meals from day to day. So having, say if you have 4 meals per day, a breakfast, a lunch, an evening meal, and maybe some snacks, and they would be the same every single day. And a lot of people would benefit from this if they are busy individuals because it gives them a lot more structure. It's easier to prep and it's very easy to follow as well. There's no kind of second guessing. And obviously, what is flexible dieting? And essentially flexible dieting is, there's different methodologies and approaches. So maybe like if it fits your macros approach, and that's essentially where you set your macros per day and you can, relatively have whatever you want, roughly speaking, as long as it fits your requirements for that day. Okay, so protein, carbs and fats will be set for specific days or the same for each day based on training days and rest days. And you can use things like MyFitnessPal to scan as you go. Okay, obviously requires a little bit more planning and a lot of tracking. I've tried both. My personal preference is a meal plan. Okay, and what I am now doing, and this is where things can get quite interesting, is as I transition from prep into my off season, after following a meal plan for nearly 12 months, I guess, I am going to be doing a bit of a hybrid approach. So this works really well for, I'd say, slightly more experienced people when it comes to tracking their food, because what I will find now is I'm very happy for the same breakfast every single morning. I'm very happy for the same pre-workout and post-workout meal. However, in the evening, so I can now, enjoy food with Hannah and my girlfriend, actually fiance. That sounds weird. And family, of course, in the evening. What I will do is pretty much like a 80-90% meal plan, 20-10% flexible dieting approach. And that essentially means that my last evening meal can be kind of rotational, as long as it hits the requirements that are needed to make up for the rest of the day. That works really well for me at this current time. Obviously, when it comes to when I need it a little bit more dialed in, and we'll talk about the kind of intricate details in a second, I would follow a meal plan typically because there's benefits to it in regards to simplicity. I know what food shop I need to buy at the start of the week. I know how many meals I need to prep in advance. Basically, I know and have so much more clarity on each day what I'm going to be eating, what time, and basically how much food I need to buy. So obviously flexible dieting can work if you're doing it, solely just if it fits your macros and using something like MyFitnessPal. But I think a tendency a lot of people struggle with, and I've done this myself in the past, is that, I was getting to maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and I was like, check MyFitnessPal, and it said like, you've got, 15 grams of fats left. I was like, what am I going to do? Scoff some dark chocolate. I've got some nuts in the cupboard. And that in itself creates a lot of kind of internal stress. And my personal preference, again, from a digestion standpoint, and you will have heard me speak about this on my channel before, is that your body craves regularity and predictable, circumstances, so to speak. So from a food standpoint, if you're chopping and changing your foods every single day, your GI tract, your digestive system, is essentially going to have to work overtime to essentially, digest these foods firstly, but also partition these different nutrients that are coming in from day to day. And although it seems for a majority of people, a better, an easier, a more fun option, because a lot of people do, shy away from a meal plan because it's boring, it's the same foods every single day, I don't want to live like a robot. Typically, these people aren't the ones that get results. And a lot of my clients follow meal plans, and if you've seen this channel or my Instagram page, you'll see that my clients get a lot of results. And I'd like to think I get results as well. So why I prefer meal plans typically, and I'm going to go back to what I said at the start. I am not pro meal plan. and anti-flexibility, flexible dieting, not one is superior. But why I prefer it for my clients and myself is it reduces decision fatigue. Like I mentioned just before, you don't want to get to, your last meal of the day and you realize, oh, I've just had my tea, but I'm, 20 grams short of carbs. Because then you're leaving yourself short of carbohydrates, which obviously in turn is going to firstly possibly increase the deficit a little bit more than it needs to be. Second of all, you're not getting your body fueled enough for maybe the next day in regards to training. And thirdly, again, it just creates this internal stress. It's like, oh, I've missed 20 grams of carbs. What can I have? And then you end up grabbing, I've done it in the past, like Haribo's or just like a little bit of fruit. And it's just not good to chop and change that frequently. Your body, again, going back to what I've said, will really appreciate that kind of continuation of the same foods coming in, and this is how a lot of people will get the best results, by following the meal plan. It also, it gives you more structure to your week. So like we mentioned before that, at the start of the week, and I'm sure for a lot of people watching this, you've got, busy jobs, you've got families, you've got kids. The last thing that you want to be worrying about is, oh, I've got, you got 20 grams of carbs left or 20 grams of fats left, whatever it is. Because it deviates away from the consistency side of things. And if you're worrying about, what I need to get in, I've just run out of avocados, so I've not got enough fats for the day. You're just leaving yourself short every single time. So it creates a lot more structure. And if you're a busy individual with work, with, training, with family life, the last thing that you want to be worrying about as well, on top of all these other stresses that you maybe have going on within your life, is what food you're going to be eating from day to day. So like I say, meal plans create just continuations of structure from day to day, and it just removes one big stress that you don't need, okay? And once you find a meal plan that you enjoy, and like for me, for example, I can rinse and repeat the same foods months after months after months, and I probably have for years, to be fair. Because one, I enjoy it, the foods as well, and two, it gives me very good results, and it does for a lot of my clients as well. It also speeds up the meal prep side of things as well, and shopping. So something that I implement with a lot of my clients is, if you are busy and you're busy, a busy individual watching this, one thing that supermarkets do nowadays, Tesco especially, is when you do an online shop, you can actually click reoccurring shop. So it saves you, going into the actual store, buying stuff that you don't necessarily need, and you can choose a time slot that suits you. So they can drop it off in the evening after work. The food's always fresh. It's obviously the same food shop as you got the previous week. If you need to add stuff to it, you can. And this in itself, it speeds up the whole process of having to prep, having to, worry about if things are going to be in store or not. So it's a massive game changer in regards to just speeding up, a general life. And in a busy world that we live, and probably a lot of people watching this do have busy lives, if that can be, a big part of your day-to-day that's removed in terms of actually driving to the shop, going to the shop, choosing the foods, not seeing the foods that you want, again, it's a game changer for productivity long term as well. And it's obviously easy to kind of troubleshoot if progress stalls. And what I mean by this is, essentially, if you're on a dieting phase, let's use that as an example, and you're, for the first few weeks, your scale weight's coming down nicely, you're motivated, and then all of a sudden you see a bit of a stall in your scale weight, and it slows down. But then, you've been changing your foods from day to day because you've been following a flexible dieting approach where you're changing the food source that's coming in, you're changing maybe the fiber intake that's coming in. And then you don't know what change to make. Like, do you further reduce calories? Do you just ride the wave a little bit longer and, cross your fingers and hope that it'll come down? When we stick to continuous foods, we can identify when we need to make a change a lot more accurately. And I always say, if we're guessing, we aren't going to be able to get the best from it. And if we can see that, all right, so it's been 5 days and we've still not seen any change within the scales or any change within your body composition, with following a meal plan, we can simply remove X, macronutrient, reduce carbs maybe, for example. And this will allow us just to see a lot more progress across the board long term. Because if you're kind of having different foods from day to day, it's hard to identify if you're actually losing weight or you're just having different foods. So it's affecting your kind of digestion, it's affecting, how much sodium or salt might be in them foods. So again, what I often see with flexible dieting is it doesn't work for everyone. It's neither good or bad. and that's essentially just how it is. You know, variety in different foods as well will potentially lead to some digestive issues. So like I said to you just now, if we're chopping, changing, swapping foods, you know, one day we're having potatoes as a carb source, the next it's pasta, the next it's rice, the next day it's bread, like your body is just going to be like, whoa, what do you want me to do here? Do you want me to, you know, get the most out of this from a digestive standpoint? Do you want to just kind of rid of this as quickly as possible? So it typically leads to a lot of kind of fluctuations on the scales as well. And, you know, due to the inconsistent food choices, if you're having, like I say, different macros, different sources of foods from day to day, you know, whether it be gluten, whether it be fiber, it's going to affect your scale weight. It's going to affect water retention. It's going to affect a multitude of things. And this, when we're on a fat loss phase or even a muscle building phase, is the last thing that you want, because you're going to start to get frustrated with the fact that your scale weight's kind of looking like this, okay? When you follow a meal plan, it can go like that, but it's very much more towards the linear approach. Some people struggle to stay consistent as well without the structure, okay? So this is why I get a lot of my guys to follow a meal plan, because like we said, I keep saying like we said at the start, but like we said previously, if you're a busy individual, a meal plan will just give you that structure that you need across the week. You know, it removes any second guessing. Oh, what should we have for tea tonight? Oh, I don't know. We've got a little bit of mince left, but there's no rice, there's no pasta. When you've got a food shop at the start of the week, you know exactly what you're having every single day. Okay, and the stress in itself sometimes can massively spike things like cortisol. Cortisol is a fat storage hormone, so therefore, again, even from like a hormonal standpoint, it's going to build up stress and potentially take away from your journey. But again, not to kind of throw too much shade on the flexible side of things, it's, you know, it's not a one size fits all. Some people thrive, you know, with the flexibility. Some really experienced people, but typically the experienced people do have set meals still, and this is again what I'm going to be doing. You know, it gives them that kind of freedom to have an evening meal with family. But as long as you know, like for a very good example, tonight I'm going to a family barbecue. I know what my macros are left for the day. I've had, you know, my breakfast, I've had my pre-workout, I've had my post-workout, so I've got 2 meals left. So within them 2 meals, I'm going to combine the macros together. Okay, so let's just say for argument's sake, it's 100 grams of protein, 100 grams of carbs, 40 grams of fats. Okay, I'm then going to use that as like a banking method to then have said burgers, sausages, hot dogs, chicken, whatever's at the barbecue, to fit that into my kind of macros for the day. Okay, and I can do this now because I've finished my prep. I'm into the off season. I can have that flexibility. People who are just starting probably won't get away with this as easy because they essentially will just take the piss. Okay, they're like, oh yeah, I've got a few fats left there. And remember, it's all well and good having macro targets to hit, but there's a reason why we have things like avocado. There's a reason why we have things like dark chocolate. They're good fats. You know, it's not anywhere near like the fat that you would get in, you know, cheese or a burger or anything like that. You know, fats aren't just fats. You know, some fats are deemed bad and obviously will be very much more caloric dense. Some fats will massively benefit us from like a hormonal standpoint as well. This is why we have certain fats within our diet. Others need structure to actually build the habits and get results. So like I say, if you're a complete beginner or someone who's not seen the results that they wanted to before, and you're going to go straight in with a flexible diet, good luck, because it's going to be hard. Like I can do it now. Maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would struggle to do it. And this is me having done it for over a decade, okay? And again, it depends on the person, not just the plan. So if you're someone who's a bit sporadic and even just your week's all over the place, you can imagine what your foods are going to be like, okay? So here's what I would recommend. Start with a meal plan. Start with, 4, 5, 6 meals a day that you know you can stick to and know that you can enjoy. Remember, meal plans don't have to be boring. You can, literally spice things up by adding seasoning, spices, and just making it a bit more enjoyable to stick to. I think that's the biggest one that I want you to take away from this. Meal plans don't have to be boring. I think meal plans have had a bad name for themselves over the year because it just seems like it's just chicken and rice, salads and chicken, salads by themselves. It's not like that at all, okay? And if you want to find out a little bit more about what is included in meal plans for my clients, then please drop a comment below. But learn the basics first, start with a meal plan. Set your macros by all means, but have just continuation of meals from day to day. Don't make things super confusing for yourself. Once you do get comfortable with that, then you can obviously start to introduce a bit of flexibility. Once you're consistent though and confident, and a lot of people do lack that consistency, and you'll hear that word time and time again in the fitness industry. And there's the reason why it's said time and time again, you need consistency to get results. And the key to maintaining a habit is just to start with the basics, okay? So to kind of summarize this video, meal plans, they provide structure, they provide consistency, and they are hassle-free, okay? Flexible dieting, obviously it gives you more variety, of course, but there is a lot more room for error when following a flexible dieting approach. So choose what aligns with your lifestyle, but don't underestimate the power of structure. To summarize this video, it sounds like I'm very much pushing towards meal plans, which, having given the track record of results that I've had with clients and myself, there's a reason why. I'm not doing it for a laugh. I'm not getting you to follow a meal plan because that's the only way that you can get results. But for a lot of people, they need that structure, and that's where a lot of people lack. So if you can just create a breakfast that you like, and you can obviously vary it from training day and rest day, choose a breakfast that you know you can like, and know that you like and you can stick to for longer than a week. Choose a lunchtime meal that you know you can stick to. And again, this is where you can have a bit of flexibility. As long as you've got like a consistent protein source. So let's say, for example, lunchtime you always have chicken. You could swap that between a wrap, a bagel, some rice, some pasta. But again, this is when you might start to see a little bit of a discrepancy within things like scale weight. But like the evening meal, what I'm going to be doing, moving forward so I can eat with Hannah is we'll probably have 5% mince. But we might have lasagna, we might have chili, we might have burgers, we might have, bolognese, and we can just rotate that round and round. But in a building phase, it doesn't matter too much. But when you are in a fat loss phase and you want to see more consistent results, you are better off sticking to structured meals to get the best results. You don't have to do it forever. Once you get into the building phase, you can have that flexibility back, okay? Hopefully this video has helped. If you have any questions in regards to flexible dieting or meal plans, please feel free to drop me a message. Remember to leave a like, comment below if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.